And now it's time to preview an upcoming game with Ryan Metzler.
Hey everybody, it's Ryan Metzler here again, and today we're going to do another Kickstarter preview, this time for an expansion of a game that's already out on the market. And that game is Wrong Chemistry by Mage Company. Now the expansion is called Wrong Chemistry Expand Your Lab. And what this game is going to add, or what this expansion is going to add, is a whole host of new elements, a couple of new gameplay elements, like scientists that you can use for special abilities, or some new elements that provide even more points, or even some new special actions you can take on your turn to further manipulate the board and hopefully get more points. So real quick, why don't we take a look at what you're going to get with this expansion and the gameplay of the base game plus the expansion. We'll take a look at how the components are going to interact. A reminder, these are prototype components, not final quality components. And then at the end, I'll come back here and I'll sum it all up for you. So here you can see the components for Wrong Chemistry and the new Kickstarter expansion, Wrong Chemistry Expand Your Lab. Now we're first going to cover the rules of the base game, and then I'll show you what this expansion adds. A reminder that many of these are prototype quality components. What you see here in the center are actually the base components for Wrong Chemistry, but some of the cards as well as the tokens you'll see here are prototype components, not what you will be getting in the final version of the expansion for the game. Now, as I said, we've seen this before, I've done a review, but real quick we're going to cover this game. The idea of the game is that each player has a handful of elements. There are easy elements in green, which are worth 1 point. There are medium elements in purple, which are worth 2 points. And there are harder elements in red, which are worth 3 points. In the beginning of the previous version of the game, or in the base game, you got a random assortment of these cards. But now you get 2 easies, 1 medium, and 1 hard, which gives kind of a balancing start point to the game. Now on your turn you're going to have 4 actions in the base game, and those 4 actions allow you to do various things with the state of this board. The whole idea is that you're trying to make the shape on the picture shown here in order to score the points of the card. So for example, Citrium here requires that you have this shape made out of the tiles with the appropriate wooden discs placed on the right tiles of the board. So on your turn, you have 4 possible actions to take, or 4 action points, which can be divided amongst various actions. So one action could be to remove one of these discs, or another action could be to add a disc from off of the board onto an empty tile, and each tile can only ever have 1 of these wooden pieces. Another action is once you have an empty tile, you may move that tile to any other location on the board. So for example, since that tile is empty, I can move it over to there. And now you'll see I've changed the arrangement of the board. A 4th possible movement is to move one piece from one tile to an empty tile. So instead of taking it from off of the board, moving it from one location to another, which is a quicker way of arranging things amongst the board how you need them to be. One of the final actions, or one of the final base actions, is that you may always discard one of the cards you have from your hand in order to be able to draw more cards at the end of the turn. So if you've decided you really don't think you want to do Labdinum here, you can discard this card and be able to draw a card from a pile in order to get a new card into your hand that maybe you can accomplish. You'll note that there are 2 draw piles. In the base game there are only 1, but they've divided this into 2 to give you 2 different areas to draw from if you think that one pile might have a better card than the other. But it's really just a random chance as to which tile or pile you'd like to draw from. Throughout your 4 actions you're going to be trying to, as I said, make the shapes you have on your cards. So maybe you start the game off and you're looking at the starting shape and you think, okay, how can I accomplish one of the cards in my hand by taking 4 actions? And you look at what you have. Well, I have Niobium here, and it's pretty close to the starting position, but I'm not sure if it can be done in 3 actions. So let's take a look. Maybe I take 1 action to remove this from the board, and then I take a 2nd action, that's 2 actions, in order to move the black piece from there over to there. We're getting closer. I need to take a 3rd action to remove this white piece from the board, and we'll see that I've actually accomplished the pattern on the board here. And so I would be able to score this card out of 3 of my 4 actions, placing it in front of me, and now that's part of my score pile. In addition, each of these cards has a number in the top right-hand corner. We'll see that this one is 41, which is its periodic table number. And if you get a series of these in a row, a run, you'll get extra points at the end of the game. So a run of 3 cards with 3 consecutive numbers would be worth 3 points. So you'll want to pay attention to that. Now, in addition to the base actions, there are several actions you can take that are actually not base actions. There are group actions that can be taken, and some of them you can take once per turn, some of them you can take multiple times. The 2 from the base game are Restartium and Extramovium. Now Restartium here, it looks like this, and it says that you may use one of your actions on your turn to set the board back to the starting position. So you could use your first action, or any action throughout your turn, to make sure that the board is as it should be at the start of the game. So we would have it looking like this again. If you use that, you'd have 3 moves left to use. The other one is called Extra Movium, and the reason for this action is that you can use this by discarding one of the cards that you've already scored, so for example, this one here, in order to get 3 extra actions on your turn. And you can do this unlimited times as long as you have a card you want to discard from your score pile in order to take more actions. The reason to do this is that many of the harder cards, the 3-value cards, like the one that I showed you earlier, are much more complicated and require a lot of moving around of the board pieces or adding of more discs or relocation of discs, and so you may need more actions on your turn in order to accomplish them, because on your opponent's turn they're of course going to rearrange the board to the way that they need the board to be. So discarding cards from your score pile is a good way to get extra moves, as long as the moves that you're taking result in accomplishing a new element that's going to be worth more points than the points you discarded. So that's the basis of the base game. You're going to keep playing until both of the piles are gone here. Well, it would be both of the piles, but essentially whoever has the most points at the end of the game, by collecting elements that they've managed to accomplish by rearranging the board out here and getting runs of cards, is going to be the winner. Now, as I said, the new game brings a whole new element to things. It's going to add 66 element cards, it's going to add some scientists, and it's going to add some of these new elements you see up top here that are not in the deck, as well as a couple of extra action cards. Now, you're always going to have 4 cards in your hand, and as I said, in the new version of the game, you actually start with 2 easies, 1 medium, and 1 hard, and you draw up to 4 at the end of your turn. So discarding is a good way to get more cards into your hand. The setup for the game does not change, but some of the components are going to be used in slightly different ways. First, you'll note that each of these tiles, when you see them, actually has a reverse side that is gray. This is important in some of the new elements that are out on the board. So some of the new elements that are included in the deck will require you to have gray tiles, and you can do that simply by using one of your actions as a new action to flip a tile over, but it has to be empty, of course. And so you can flip that over, and you'll be able to create all new elements by having 2 colored tiles onto the board there. The next thing that you get is you get 2 new extra move cards. There's cards that are off to the side that I haven't talked about yet. The first one here is called Transmutium, and you can use one of your actions in order to make the board state into an element that you've already finished. So let's say you've already finished Niobium, I showed you earlier, and you want the board to look like that because you have another element in your hand that's pretty similar to it and could be created using fewer moves if you were to get this starting position. So you can use one of your actions on your turn to transmute the board into Niobium. And you can do that for anything that you've already scored, so you would go ahead and rearrange the board to that position, and you would be ready to go for your later elements. So once you get it all set up, it's going to look like this, and now you can go ahead with your turn with your remaining actions. So that is Transmutium. Now the next one is the element of surprise, and this is another one that you're going to be using on your opponent's turn. It's going to give you more action. So instead of using Extra Movium on your own turn by discarding cards, you can use the element of surprise, but we'll come back to that shortly. The other thing included here is some scientists, and at the beginning of the game, each player will be dealt 2 scientist cards, from which they'll choose one of these scientists to use. Each of these scientists has a special ability. So for example, we'll see here that this scientist allows you to, as a free action, place a white disc onto a gray tile. So if one of these tiles was flipped over, as a free action, I could move a white disc onto that tile. And you can do this up to 3 times per game, marked by these tokens that you have, and each time you use one, you'll put it on there. If you keep your scientist until the end of the game, there's a variant where you get bonus points for keeping that scientist, not using up all of your free moves, and it'll help you win at the end of the game. Other scientists have different abilities. For example, we have, let's take a look at this one here. This one here allows you to swap a tile between gray and yellow freely. Or we have this one here that allows you to remove a black disc from a gray tile for free. Now, we also have other ones that affect the element of surprise, and that's another use for scientists. Is on your opponent's turn, instead of using the ability of your scientist, you may put one of your tokens onto your scientist, and that will allow you to use the element of surprise. What that does is it gives you 2 actions to use at the end of your opponent's turn. Now, in a multiplayer game, this is going to affect the board status for the next player. But in a 2-player game, it will affect the board status for you, essentially giving you 2 actions on your opponent's turn to set the board up for what you want to do on your turn. Some of the scientists that are here, for example, this one right here, gives you 1 extra action whenever you use that. So you'll see that usually you get 2 actions, but if you use her ability, you get 3 actions at the end of your opponent's turn. Another one of the scientists actually makes using the Transmutium a free action, but you can only do it up to 3 times per game. So you'll see that the uses of these scientists are many and varied, but are going to kind of dictate how you play the game from that point on. If you can take things off of gray hexes for free, you're probably going to focus a lot on the things that allow you to remove things from gray hexes. Or if you get the one that allows you to switch between yellow and gray hexes, you may focus more on switching back and forth for your elements. So that's how the scientists work. Finally, in the new game, we actually have 5 elements that are up here at the top, and these change the end condition for the game. What's going to happen is the game is going to end when all 5 of these are taken, but they're much more difficult and they're worth 5 points apiece. So we'll see, we have livermorium here. This one requires you to have 2 gray hexes out, and each one of the hexes has a different piece of wood on it. So you'll see we have 3 whites and we have 4 blacks, which is the majority of the pieces of wood in the game. But if you accomplish this, you're going to get 5 points. You even have to have a white disc on the center tile of the board, which is still the only tile on the board that cannot be moved or flipped over. The other ones are difficult as well. You'll see we have this one here, which is kind of a spaceship configuration with 2 gray tiles. Or we have this one here with 2 gray tiles on the opposing ends and all white tiles in the center. When each of these is taken on a turn, and you can accomplish them just like any of your other elements, you're going to put them in your score pile and get the 5 points at the end of the game. If all 5 of them are taken, the game will end at the end of the round, and whatever player has the most points will be the winner. Well, there you have it. That is Wrong Chemistry Expand Your Lab, including 66 new element cards, 10 of those scientists, each with a different ability. The 5, of course, 5-point elements, which give you a new endgame condition, as well as several variants they've included in the rulebook and different ways to use those scientists, different ways to use the elements, and so forth and so on. So they've added quite a bit to the game here. They've gone through some steps to try and balance the starting positions of each player, giving them each a known number of 1, 2, and 3-point elements so that they all start off on equal ground and have choices to make from that point on. With the drafting of the scientists, one of 2 choices, you can kind of dictate how you want to move about in the game and what you think you want to focus on in terms of getting points. So with all of that said, I think they've added a good amount here. I think it's something that you should check out on Kickstarter and perhaps even pledge to.
Thanks for watching our review today. For more information about board games, as well as the #1 board game audio podcast, check out Dicetower.com for reviews, interviews, and more. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower.